One of a new breed of museums gaining in popularity with people of all ages in all parts of the country is the Science and Technology Touch It Museum. While the participatory or Touch It exhibit is evident in science centers from New York to Mexico City to our own Pacific Science Center in Seattle, it is most dramatically apparent at the Exploratorium in San Francisco. The Exploratorium started operating in the fall of 1969, with only a handful of exhibits scattered through a cavernous building in the Palace of Fine Arts. In 8 years, the museum has expanded to well over 400 exhibits and more than 200 paid and volunteer staff members. The Exploratorium is a fun place designed to appeal to people of all ages. The underlying theme of the Exploratorium is perception. It is a science museum based on a core of material that involves visual, auditory, and tactile perception. The exhibits provide demonstrations and explorations on optics, acoustics, motion, electricity, waves and resonance, atomic spectra, mathematics, and several other related phenomena. It is a museum about aspects of nature that are not generally available to people. The exhibits reflect insights about nature through the eyes of both scientists and artists. In addition to the exhibits on light, vision, sound, and so on, a new series of displays on animal behavior and animal senses is being established by Dr. Charlie Carlson. Wherever possible, the behavior of the animals is compared with the behavior of people. Dr. Charlie Carlson.
They are animals that they're insects that are small, they eat plants, and they are frequently preyed upon by predators.
So they have to watch?
They have to watch what's going on around them. And in this particular exhibit, we utilize the grasshopper's visual alarm system, as it were. And this system tells a grasshopper when it wants to be ready to jump. Okay, so it's like the first cue that the grasshopper picks up. It's visual because it's something that happens at a distance, so the grasshopper is ready to jump whenever something approaches. And if you take a look at the oscilloscope, you'll see a whole series of spikes that happen, and those are actually nerve impulses that are happening from a variety of cells in the grasshopper's brain. I can show you the grasshopper here. It's this particular animal here that we have. You can see this small wire here, which is implanted in the animal's chest or thorax, and we have that wire in a very circuitous path actually running down to our oscilloscope over here.
Which shows the nerve impulses
Which shows the nerve impulses of the grasshopper. So now if everybody holds very still, okay, we'll see our trace go fairly flat, and there's still some movement in the periphery, but let me try moving now. As I move around, you can, well, you'll see a series of large spikes are happening. I think we're going to get some more because some kids are running by here right now. Right there, as I moved, in that instant, you saw.
You can also hear it.
Okay, now if I move it, right there. Okay, there was the series. So as I move around, now one problem that is also associated with this is what happens if leaves and whatnot are moving around the grasshopper all the time. Well, and so if we go back and forth in a repetitive fashion, such as a blade of grass might do if it were moving near the grasshopper, it stops, okay? And if I go to a new spot, suddenly the activity is going to increase again. This is because the grasshopper is habituated to the signal. It's just like you wear your clothes and you don't know you have them on all the time. Well, your nervous system essentially says that's no longer interesting information, so I'm not going to pay any attention to it.
It's no longer a threat.
It's no longer a threat in the case of the grasshopper, and so this animal is continually looking for something new that's happening in the environment. This newness is the critical thing.
We see grasshoppers as leapers, and that's not necessarily true, is it, John?
Right. Grasshoppers, okay, you think about it, and you're used to running through fields and stuff and watching these grasshoppers take off. Well, that jump is actually a defensive maneuver by the animal to get away from a threat that's immediate.
Which is yourself.
Which is
going through the
yourself.
grass.
And normally, as you can see with these grasshoppers, and this particular large one down here, the animal is very content to just sit around. And in fact, they spend most of the time sitting around. It's the safest place for them to be. When they jump, they have no idea where they're going.
Dr. Frank Oppenheimer, an atomic physicist, conceived and developed this Museum of Perception. He sees the Exploratorium as a place that integrates science, technology, and the arts.
It's called a Museum of Science, Technology, and Human Perception, but it's really a learning resource, a learning center, and a resource that people can use in any way they want to, which has real experiences, real props, things which show aspects of nature that people aren't familiar with, which they can build up some intuition about and gain some understanding, and use in a great variety of different ways, whether it's through schools, through individual wandering through, at the sightseeing level, at the real studying level, coming back over and over again.
I noticed there are no real guides nor exhibits behind closed doors, or it's all very out in the open. There must be some kind of a theory behind the way you've set the Exploratorium up.
Well, part of it was dictated by the space and moving into it, but it turned out to be just the right kind of thing, because nature really is all multiply connected, and by dividing it up into walls or chapters of a book, you lose that sense that one thing leads to another and is part of another. So this wide open space with divided into some sort of sections and some organization, I think is the really best way to do it.
This idea of the interconnections between all things in nature finds perfect expression in this glass tube. Bill Parker, one of the many artists in residence at the Exploratorium who designed and built this exhibit, likens it to a trapped lightning bolt.
Well, it's not really a machine. I would call it an art piece, but it's a device that shows electricity flowing through a gas. It's very similar to a trapped lightning bolt.
A trapped lightning bolt.
Right.
Can you explain that?
Well, lightning goes from the clouds to the ground through the atmosphere, and when it does, it makes the air glow, and that's the flash, and it's very quick normally in nature. This is sort of a continuous low-power lightning bolt.
How does the blue light go tiptoe along the top like that?
Well, it's tiptoeing in little beads because the lightning bolt is being turned on and off very quickly. And the electricity breaks up into droplets that to us look like little blue beads.
Where is it going from, and what is it going
Well,
to?
there's two ends to every circuit, or every time you move electricity, it has to go from one spot to another. In this case, there's one end of the tube generating a push on the electricity, and the other end of the tube is pulling on that electricity.
And
so there's a flow, there's a current,
Yeah. Okay.
much like in a stream.
That we're seeing.
Exactly. Now, if I put my hand somewhere in the middle, let's say, some of that electricity that is being pulled from the source of the tube, source end of the tube, to the receiving end of the tube, is then attracted to my hand.
Why?
Well, I'm acting as much as a pull as the other end of the tube is.
Do you have
Our bodies
electricity in your body?
have what you call a capacitance for electricity. It's like when you rub your feet on a carpet, your body gets charged up to a certain field or a certain electricity level. And when you touch a doorknob, you get a little spark. A bigger person would get a bigger spark.
Really?
Because
his body is larger
it
and
can absorb more field. Exactly.
But you don't feel any shock when you touch this.
No, this is much less voltage, fewer electrons pushing as hard.
What's inside the tube?
Well, inside the tube is very little, actually. It's almost a vacuum, as you'd find in outer space. But what is there is a gas called xenon, which is Greek for the stranger. It's a very rare gas found in the atmosphere that ionizes or loses its electrons very easily. And that's why it can glow with very little electricity really being there.
Is that similar to fluorescent tubing light?
Very similar. Fluorescent tubes, sometimes when they're going out, you see little bands of light, much like the beads in here.
It flickers.
It flickers, yeah. Or a neon tube and a neon sign, very much the same.
The exhibits are not designed to gently lead the visitor from the simple to the complex. Connections must be made in the mind of the individual. Several exhibits demonstrate the different characteristics of sound, and most of them require some playful manipulation. Sally Dunsing, Exploratorium teacher.
Is take this violin bow, and on the edge of the plate, I'll bow down, and what I'm going to do is send pulses or waves through the metal, and you'll hear it as sound. When it hits an edge, it'll reflect off, and it'll hit all these different edges. And as it reflects off, it's going to start bumping into each other, and I'll keep bowing, so there'll be sound waves coming off and then bouncing off, and there's all kinds of activity going on. Well, certain places, when the sound waves collide, they're actually going to cancel each other out. So you'll get spots where there's hardly any vibration or very little vibration going on. And so all the sand's going to get shoved to those particular places.
Where the vibrations have stopped.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll show you what happens.
Okay. It makes a symmetrical pattern.
Right. And if we had an irregular shape, I don't think the pattern would be so symmetrical. But since this is symmetrical sides, they're bouncing off symmetrically, and all these different patterns form. Now I'll try another note, and we can get a different pattern. You really can get a variety of different patterns. Some days I'm really good at it, and some days I can't.
Give it another try.
Okay, I'll try one more. Okay, that's the same note.
Yeah.
And you can start seeing that it's about the same kind of pattern. I'll try one more on the corner. I don't know what's going to happen.
As the plate rings, the sand on top dances into a symmetric pattern that shows the shape of the vibration producing the sound.
How does this idea of a hands-on exploratorium relate to everyday living?
I think it relates in a number of ways. To me, the most interesting one is that people do work and are in contact with a great many things in their homes, in their cars, and in beaches and nature. And because so many of them are inaccessible or incomprehensible, they feel that everything is incomprehensible. And to have one environment in which you find out you can understand something, I think has a lot of carryover to noticing more things and enhancing curiosity and giving people the satisfaction of saying, oh, I see.
I'm holding a freshwater crayfish in my hand, and these are found all over in streams in Northern California and Southern California, all across America. They eat them in Louisiana. They eat the abdomen part of the crayfish, which you can see here.
Charlie, what parts on our body correspond to the abdomen of the crayfish?
Well, just about any joint that we have in our body has muscles around it which either are contracted or stretched. And if you want to think about it, the easiest one we could think of is maybe what happens whenever you move your arm around. So if you hold your arm out straight and then bend it up, you have stretched the muscles on the back part of your arm. Your brain is able to tell what position your arm is in, even if you close your eye, because it's receiving information from the muscle stretch receptor organs, so that in this case, it's got this very nice tail flexion. And each segment is independently innervated, so that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 muscle stretch receptor organs located on this side of the tail. There are another 6 located on this side. And they tell the crayfish how far its tail is bent this way. So in this exhibit, we've cut a small hole in the shell and we've exposed the muscle stretch receptor organ. And then we put an electrode which is capable of recording off the nerve around that group of muscle fibers. Now, if you go ahead and bend the tail down, we will stretch the muscles in the crayfish tail right along here, which will in turn, it also stretches the stretch receptor organs, and we will see an increase in the frequency of which these nerve impulses are happening on here. And you can hear them as slight clicks in the background right now, and they're happening. There was one. Pop, 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 pop.
Do you want me to take hold of the plunger and push
Sure,
the
and
tail
just
down?
go ahead and push it down, and we'll...
I'll put the microphone up by the clicks.
So, and when you lift off, it stops. And if you, okay, now that's maximal bend in that case. So now if you go to an intermediate place, I've just increased it a little bit. As I push it down further, it's going to increase a little bit more further. And that's maximum in this case. We have to restrict the amount that people are allowed to bend the tail down, actually, because they would wreck the preparation in a very short period of
So
time.
actually it only goes down a very short way.
Yeah, and actually the rate at which this will fire goes up to about 1,000 times per second. So that you're looking at so we're just barely touching the surface of the actual output of that cell. I mean, in terms of how fast it will fire. So this is why we use the crayfish and why stretch receptor organs are important, and they are found in everybody.
Everybody's got them.
And every animal's got them.
Well, we have two major tactile exhibits. One is our geodesic dome that we call the Tactile Gallery, and the other one is the tree that we're leaning against. And the tree is mainly made of ferrous cement, and there are about a dozen or 2 dozen different textures on it, from fir to San Francisco mist to heat, ice, fur, leather, all different kinds of things, including vibration.
Things you can touch and feel. And
Yes.
What is the point of experiencing the tactile senses?
Well, it heightens your awareness, and that's mainly what the Exploratorium is about. We're a museum of perception, and we try and help people perceive things outside the museum as well as inside.
This is a trapezoidal window. It's not an ordinary window, but is wider at one end and tapered at the other. It looks like it's swinging back and forth, but watch it closely. It's playing tricks on you.
With the trapezoid window, one side is actually smaller and one side is actually bigger.
Sally Dunsing, a teacher at the Exploratorium, is explaining the technical reasons why this trapezoidal window plays tricks on you, explaining why you think it's swinging back and forth.
Further away from you or getting closer, but your brain refuses to admit at
The
one
principle of this trick, or optical illusion, is quite simple. Since you're used to seeing ordinary squared windows, your mind refuses to let you see anything different. You see only what you're used to seeing all the time. But seeing is not always believing. Watch carefully as Sally tapes a piece of paper onto the lower edge of the window. It shows in what direction the window is really moving, around in a circle.
So it's always, now at one point the far side will be further away from you, and the small side will be closer. If I take the card off, see if it's
But
the center.
when she takes the paper off, your mind sees the window swinging back and forth again. The idea that windows are square is so strong that your eye brain ignores the fact that you know the window is moving in a circle. Here is another test for your eye brain. Look closely at the impossible triangle. Are the corners joined? If you move, you get a different clue. The figure is hardly triangular, as you can see from the side. But if you move back to the front and align the edges, your eye brain will again see a triangle. In how many other instances do we stick to a judgment or favorite opinion despite contrary information?
What are some of the principles behind the laser?
Well, the laser works from a gas. If you look at this laser over here, I could show you how it works. There's a tube filled with two gases, helium and neon. And this is a cathode, this is an anode. So there's an electric current flowing through here. It charges these electrons. There's a mirror at the top, a mirror at the bottom. And the light inside this tube gets reflected back and forth inside there.
Is that like a neon light? Same
Exactly.
principle?
The same thing except for the mirrors inside. Then the mirror at the top isn't a perfect mirror. It lets some of the light through. And the light that gets through is the laser light.
What are some of the uses for the laser beam?
Well, let's see. Lasers are used in medicine. They're used in communications. They're used in photography now. Even in surveying. Keeping a straight line is something that you need for surveying. I used to work in a coal mine, and in a coal mine you dig the coal out in tunnels, and it's very important that the tunnels are straight because the space between the tunnels is what holds up the roof,
Right.
the walls there, and they line up the tunnels using lasers.
Explain what you mean by straight line is very important. The laser only goes in a straight line?
That's right. Where most white light spreads out, now all light travels in a straight line, but what happens with most light, you can see here, white light is made up of many different colors, many different frequencies of light, and it spreads out. Now laser light is one color, one frequency in phase, and it's all moving in a straight line. It doesn't spread out.
Is that dot there, the red dot, the laser light?
That's it. And if I step back, you can see it up on the board here. Now this will go for almost 2 miles, easily 1.5 miles, and it might spread out. It wouldn't be quite as big as a golf ball at the end of those 2 miles.
Bob, can you explain how the laser is used in photography?
What happens is, to make a photograph with a laser, it's called a hologram. And what we do is we take the light from a laser, coming up this way, and we would split it so that some of the light would go through here onto a photographic plate, and then some of the light is split up off the object that we want to photograph. The light from this object is then reflected down onto the plate. Now this light actually spreads out here and here. Because of the nature of laser light, it's coherent light, it's light that goes in a straight line. The photograph that we get on this plate, when we hold it up, develop it, hold it up, and shine a laser into it, we'll see this object 360 degrees. If we move over to, well, 180 degrees actually, the whole front, and it's like a three-dimensional object. If we move around to one side of it, we'd see the right side of the object. Move around to the other side, we could see the left side of the object. This is a hologram. Just like we talked about before, we have the plate and it's been developed, and we have a light source, a laser, shining on it. When you look at the plate from the right side, you'll see the right half of the skull. When you move around to the front, you'll see the skull from straight on, and when you move around to the left, you'll see the skull from the left side. You can see it all the way around.
I think there was a need for this kind of environment in all kinds of learning situations. So much of learning had gotten to be passive, where you couldn't feel, you couldn't repeat, you couldn't interact with and change. That's true of lectures at a university, and it's unfortunately true of television. And it's true even in lower schools, that one is learning about things one's had no experience with, no chance to play with, so one needed a place like this. And it's having that impact because this kind of a place can be reproduced, not another exploratorium, but the idea of having a place where there are experiences juxtaposed in such a way that they facilitate learning can be done in art museums, natural history museums, all kinds of museums. One doesn't have to have things to move with one's hands. One can interact if this is built into the way exhibits and props are displayed.
When you're looking at blue or when you're looking at red, what happens is like the red light comes in and goes into your eye, and these little nerves pick up just certain colors. So some nerves pick up red light, some nerves pick up blue light, some nerves pick up green light. And something happens when you do different things. Like if you keep staring at a red light, something happens. And if you keep staring at a blue light, something happens to those nerves. And I want us to do a little experiment now, trying that out. So what you do is I'm going to give you a piece of white paper and fold it in
A
half.
series of educational programs for Bay Area students and teachers is also available at the Exploratorium. Included are field trips, museum labs, and what is called School in the Exploratorium. In this school program, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classes spend a full day at the museum once a week for 5 consecutive weeks under the guidance of an Exploratorium instructor. Students study a variety of topics which deal primarily with concepts of light and sound, including the processes of hearing and seeing. Exploratorium teacher Sally Dunsing.
Why do you think that's happening? Does anybody have a theory of why that might be happening? I'll tell you why in a minute, but first, does anybody think, why do you think you're seeing a different color?
One color